Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the ninth session of the summer term 2024 of the SunoikisisDC Digital Classics and Byzantine Studies. The topic of today's session is Treebanking and Annotation to Study Reception of Ancient Language and Text. And it will be presented by our colleagues and friends here on the screen, Gabriel Bodard from the University of London, Marja Vierros from the University of Helsinki, and Alek Keersmaekers from the Catholic University of Leuven. So as always, if you're watching this live, please say hi and tell us where you are watching from. And of course, if you are a student in my class, please watch until the very end because we have some exercises for you. So this is going to be fun. I will mute myself and leave the floor to Gabby. So I will put you here. Yeah.
Great. Thanks. Thanks, Martina. Great. So I'm just going to give a very brief introduction to the topic and to sort of introduce the case study that we're working on, that Marja and I in particular are working on at the moment. And then Marja is going to talk a little bit more about tree banking and morphosyntactic annotation as a process and what we can learn from doing that. And then Alek is going to talk to us a little bit about what you can do once you have morphosyntactically annotated texts, tree banked texts, and show us a search interface for that. And then we'll come back at the end and we'll discuss a little bit more how this has ended up to be useful for the case study, but also how you as people watching this, students or other learners, can try out a couple of exercises that we've proposed and sort of go further in learning more about this at the end. So I'm just going to talk, as I say, for a couple of minutes about this one mini project, which is a reception of antiquity in later antiquity project that we're trying to use some digital philological methods to get some further insight into. And what we're looking at is some texts that come from these monuments. And so this is an older drawing of these monuments. These are the statues of Memnon in Egypt. And as you can see, even when these drawings were made, they were in a fragmentary state. By more recent times, they were even more fragmentary. You can see from these photographs, which already were not taken this century, are even more beaten up and smashed to pieces than they were in the drawing period. And there's, as with most monuments in Egypt, there's been all sorts of different phases of history of vandalism, of various different kinds of interference and damage had been done to this text. And this goes back all the way to antiquity, as is always the case. The really interesting thing about these monuments, from our point of view, is that. This is a drawing sort of reconstructing them a bit more as they were, as well as having writing all over them in the form of Egyptian hieroglyphs, which are from the original construction of the monument. There is also, as you can maybe just about see in the second image down there on the legs, and you can see better on this photograph, there is also later writing, secondary epigraphy in Greek and Latin, mostly Greek, by people of the Roman period who wrote all over the legs of these things. This obviously is vandalism. This, had writing graffiti on an ancient monument, which was already, well over 1,000 years old at the time they did this. This is the sort of thing that would be completely unconscionable from our point of view. I think we shouldn't be too morally relativistic about this, and we should also bear in mind how poor behavior it was even on the part of the ancients to do this sort of thing. But these texts are the texts that we're sort of looking at and studying, and there's a really interesting variety of texts on this. These aren't just texts, saying Julius was here. There's some fairly high literary texts on here. And in particular, we're interested in, and here's a squeeze on the left showing one text in a slightly more readable way, and a drawing of some of the texts on one of the legs here on the right. One of the sets of texts on here that we're looking at, and that Marja and I are doing a small study of, is a corpus of 4 texts, a total of I forget, so 50 or 60 lines of verse by a 2nd century Roman princess and poet by the name of Julia Balbilla, who visited Egypt with the Emperor Hadrian and Empress Sabina, and wrote these 4 poems, and had somebody inscribe these poems on the leg of the statue of Memnon as part of this. And the poems, I'll show the poems very briefly. I won't go in, read them all and go into the translation of them all, but just a quick reminder. Just this is more to give you a visualization of how large this corpus is. Okay, which is to say very small. So this is the first of the 4 poems. This is a poem in which Balbilla describes going to the statue of Memnon with the Emperor Hadrian, and the statue is famous for having a fissure in the base of the statue, which, as the statue heats up with dawn, it makes a noise, so the statue sings at dawn. And Memnon, being the son of dawn, this is obviously considered symbolic. So every morning the statue sings, it makes some sort of noise. And so she describes in this poem how they went there with Hadrian, and in honor of the great emperor, king of kings, Hadrian, it sang not once but 3 times that morning. The second poem, she's very slightly longer. She describes how she went to the stone with Sabina, the wife of Hadrian, and she talks about the mythological origins of Memnon and the story of Memnon. She talks a little bit about her own ancestry. So there's the sort of mythological and then genealogical information in this poem. The third poem, and this is a point at which I may just pause and give a little bit of context, which is part of what Marja and I find so interesting about these, is that these poems are written not in the vernacular Koine Greek that would have been the standard language of the Eastern Mediterranean in the 2nd century CE, but they're written in a language which very clearly evokes the much earlier poetic language of poets such as Sappho of Lesbos. And so some of the language here is very clearly Sapphic language in terms of its dialect, in terms of its use of language. That's relevant when we come to this poem, because in this poem, Balbilla talks about how on the next day in the mission, they went. She and Sabina, the empress, went to the statue, and the statue refused to sing that morning at all. And clearly, it was doing so because the Empress Sabina is so beautiful and gorgeous that it wanted her to come back again the next day. And she did in fact come back the next day, and it did in fact sing to her the next day. Bearing in mind this is someone writing about the wife of the emperor in a deliberately Sapphic evoking dialect. Make of that what you will. People have made a lot of it, obviously, at various times. And in the fourth poem, she sort of summarizes again the having been to the statue and heard it sing, and she gives the date and so forth. So these are 4 relatively short poems, and people have talked a lot about what may have been going on, what the relationship between Balbilla and Sabina may have been, and what the relationship between Balbilla and the emperor may have been, and various other things. So we wondered if some of the sort of digital philological methods that have been discussed in this course and in similar courses might give us further insight into these texts, that we might give us other things to think about and other ways to think about it. So this is just a few of the things that we've thought about looking at as forms of methods that might give us ways to look at the text. So we've got the text encoded in Epidoc XML. We've been looking at the emendations of the text. We've been looking at the dialects and how they differ from what we might expect to see in the epigraphic text of this period. We're looking at the archaeological and epigraphic metadata as that's encoded in Epidoc and in other database forms. We've been looking at the meter in the way that can be encoded digitally and analyzed. We've been looking at ways in which the prosopography and genealogy and other religious elements of these texts can be encoded. We've been thinking about image annotation in terms of where on the stone these various features of the text are. We've been thinking about translation alignment, aligning different versions of these texts to one another. And we've been talking about morphosyntactic annotation, in particular, thinking about the analysis of the syntax of these texts and in whether that tells us anything about the way in which this evokes earlier traditions of poetry. And all of this is in the context of thinking this very much as a reception study. These are not in their own right, if they didn't refer back to anything else, terribly exciting texts, but as a source of reception of poetic tradition, this is something we want to sort of look at and think about. So that's really just by way of context. Just wanted to sort of put that up as a sort of starting point. And Marja is going to come back now to this this penultimate point in there about morphosyntactic annotation. That's what we talk about treebanking and how can digitally encoding the syntax of text like this be used to analyze these texts in various ways. So I'll hand over to Marja.
Okay, thank you, Gabi. So you can now see my slides. Hello, everybody there, and let's start. So today, in my short presentation, I'm going to give a very short intro to treebanking, so morphosyntactic annotation, and then very short introduction to Papygric platform, where we can annotate these Balbilla inscriptions. It's meant for annotating documentary papyri, but inscriptions can be handled there as well. And then I'll demonstrate a little bit about treebanking with one of the poem by Balbilla, only a couple of sentences. So for a full tutorial of treebanking, there are in this session page, the exercise has links to a good tutorial, but there are lots of other classes within the Sunoikisis courses over the years, so you can choose whatever you want. You can have you see a list there in the Digital Classicist Wiki page, and then the guidelines, I think, are in the course page as well. So those are important when you do the annotation. And then I'll quickly compare these syntactic structures of Balbilla to treebanks of Sappho. This is only very, very preliminary, sort of non-machine facilitated at this point, but the idea is that with this kind of annotation, we can further do some more interesting queries with these texts and compare it to other literary corpora. And then Alek will show a lot more what can be done with a sort of big corpus of syntactically annotated language. So this is going sort of from very small things to bigger ones later on. So very shortly, linguistic annotation in general, you can add many different types of things to a digital text. So on the word level, you can have the lemma there, for example. The lemma is the basic form of the word, so that's sort of what's in the dictionary. Then you can add morphological annotation, so inflectional morphology, or you can add the part of speech, the word class. Then on the sentence level, you can add syntactic annotation, there we have basically, most importantly, two different grammar formalisms used, so dependency or constituent structures. I will be talking about the dependency ones. And then we could add also semantic annotation, so different meanings of the words, or sort of what's animate or what's inanimate, and this sorts of things. So many different things you could do. Basically, what we are doing is on the word level and syntactic level at this point. So treebank is the term we are using to mean a corpus of syntactically annotated sentences, text. So one tree structure is actually a hierarchical structure of one sentence, syntax of one sentence. So the treebank is the sort of parsed text corpus with the syntactic annotation. And usually it includes lemmatization and morphological annotation. So here you see the constituency tree and dependency tree, which is what we are doing usually in ancient Greek and Latin. So we have several different corpora of texts that have been linguistically annotated. Here are some of them. Might have forgotten something, but for example, for Latin, there's the Thomas Aquinas Index Domesticus treebank, and this is inspired by the Prague dependency treebank. So the Prague dependency treebank for Czech language was the thing that started the whole dependency annotation framework. So all of these are sort of children to it. For Greek, we have lots of things that follow the HELDT, so Ancient Greek and Latin Dependency Treebank framework. So here's, it's called like the Perseus family. There's HEDT trees, there's Pedalion trees, which Alek will talk more about, the Gorman trees. So Vanessa Gorman has annotated lots of Greek historiography. Papy Greek belongs to this family, so the Greek documentary papyri. Then there is the Old Indo-European languages annotated in Oslo, including Greek New Testament, for example. But then you have to always remember there's this universal model also with the dependency framework. So universal dependencies that have many, many different languages, basically using the same dependency grammar structure. And the treebanks here, some of them are also in the UD format. So the format is a little bit different. So but these are sort of quite easily possible to transform into universal dependency so that they could be compared with many other languages as well. So a little bit what it contains within this framework. So for one sentence, we have this sort of XML file in the background where the words have numbers in the sentence, and then their form is there, and then there's the lemma, and then there's the post-tag that has all the morphological information. Then we have the syntactic relation tagged, and then the head of each word, so which word governs the word. The main thing in each sentence is the predicate, and so the predicate here, the head is 0, but all the other words have one head in the number ID is here in the form. So this kind of information it contains, and the post-tag might be looking a little bit strange when you first look at it. It's just a string of numbers and letters, but each place in this string is significant. So the first place means the part of speech, the second place the person, number, tense, and so on. So when we have a verb, then certain places in this string are relevant to the verb form here. First of all, it's the verb, then it's the third person, then it's the singular, present indicative active. And for a noun, different places in this string are relevant. So there are empty slots because they are not relevant for noun. And you don't need to, when you're annotating, for example, yourself, you don't need to know by heart what these letters are, which place they are in. But when you are doing queries, for example, it might be good to know. So you can also see what the letters mean via this link. But it's a very sort of powerful string for the whole morphological information for each word. So what we have been doing in Puppy Greek, so I have had a European Research Council funded project for studying Greek documentary papyri, and Treebanking is one big part of this project. The project is already ended, but we are still working with the platform. So it consists of several different parts. It includes a grammar part, which is not actually yet public. The funding has stopped, so there's many things to do still without funding. And then there are the tree bank parts, so syntactic trees of part of the papyri, which are openly accessible also in Zenodo, for example. And then we have a search tool there where you can search for different levels of language. So you can search for phonological level information via the orthographic annotations there, and then morphology for the whole. So phonology and morphology for the whole corpus of documentary papyri. And then for syntactic structures, only for the ones that we have the manually annotated part. So it's a smaller, very much smaller subset of papyri. But other query tools for literary corpora also exist, and that's what Alek is going to talk about more. And these things are still developing. But this is the basic idea of Puppy Greek project, and we have also the annotation framework there. So we have the Greek documentary papyri there already, so it's synchronized with papyri.info. And there the TEI epidoc XML, which the papyri.info papyri are in, are pre-processed so that we get text into annotatable form. Papyri and inscriptions are both fragmentary. They contain markup showing what's fragmentary and what's supplied and so on. And that's why they cannot be annotated as they are. So they need to be pre-processed. And the same TEI epidoc XML for papyri is also with inscriptions, so we can deal with inscriptions in Puppy Greek too. So there are some differences in markup. That's why we don't have all the inscriptions up there. We made something for Balbilla only this time. So we have the Arethusa annotation tool implemented in our Puppy Greek platform. But Arethusa you can use also externally. It originally exists in Perseid's page. And you have also the links and guidelines and instructions in the Sunoikisis session page for the exercise. But then I will be going to show shortly the Balbilla annotation, and just to show first that the beginning of the first poem that you already saw in Gabby's slides, here is the translation as well. So I will just take a couple of sentences here. You see that I've heard tell that Memnon the Egyptian, warmed by the sun's rays, utters a loud sound from the Theban stone. This is the first sentence that we're going to try. Seeing Hadrian, the greatest of kings, and before greeting the sun's rays, he, Memnon, addressed him as well as he could. This is what Julia Balbilla already sort of explains in this poem, what the statues do. So they utter this sound in the morning when the sun's rays are coming. So now I should be switching to the demo. And can you say, do you see now the Papi Greek Balbilla 1 page?
Yes.
And do you see while I'm switching to
Yes.
Okay, good.
It is a little bit small, however. I don't know if you're able to zoom in at all.
Yeah, I will. I will just
Great. Thanks.
show that this is the way the Balbilla poems look like. This is the first one. So we have this sort of visual. Let me make it a bit bigger. Where we see the difference between sort of the original version and the edited version. Here we see that the Balbilles has been, the editor has corrected it to Balbilles. The stone actually says Balilles. So there are a couple of these red words here where there is some sort of editorial correction. And here also we see a gamma versus digamma issue with these poems. So there is also this letter that was already long gone, even in antiquity, but it used to be there, but the digamma sort of probably is in the stone, even though the stone cutter probably didn't actually know how it should be written. But this is what Balbilla wanted to be there, it seems like. But so the Arathusa tool is here, and then we have here the original or regularized version of this. We can choose either one we want now. And I'm going to go full screen. Do you see okay?
Yes, it's great.
Okay. So the first two short sentences I have already annotated. One thing we need to notice that they were sort of extra to the poem, just sort of that Julia Balbilla composed this and so on. So we are marking them as sort of external of the poem. We need to have some sort of artificial token for this incomplete sentence where there is no predicate. And this is possible to do with this AT button here. And maybe I was thinking Okay. Yes, so I can show you how the AT button works with this sentence, where we also don't have the predicate present. It's sort of only the subordinate clause here. But if we want to have a predicate, we should always have a predicate in a sentence. We create it with this button and placing it somewhere right here. It doesn't actually matter where, but here we add it, and we start building the tree using this tool. We see here in the morphological tab what suggestions this environment makes for these words. You should always check the morphology. It suggests something, but it doesn't. It is not necessarily always correct. But here, this is the conjunction. So there is sort of a verb that has been left out, but we have a conjunction here for this sentence, and we add it under the predicate. I will soon come back to these labels. So when the August Hadrian, so the Emperor Hadrian, heard Memnon, this is what this sentence means. And this verb is the predicate of the subordinate sentence, but since it's the subordinate sentence, it doesn't get the label predicate. But you can see the morphological annotation here. So Hadrian is the subject, and he has two attributes, the article and the title August. And hearing something gets a direct genitive object. So with the relation tab, we then can give these the relations. So here we could give this artificial token the label predicate, but since we are still not in the actual poem, but just as in the title, I will give it the label XD, so external dependent. And this conjunction that's combining, it gets the label OXC. You can understand all these labels from the guidelines and from the tutorials. And here we give this the label ADV because it's basically adverbial to the verb that is missing here. So when heard and who heard, Hadrian. So Hadrian, you see the morphology here, and here he is the subject. And the article is attribute for Hadrian, and the August, the Sebastos, is also attribute to Hadrian. And this is the object, as I said. And again, the article is the attribute. So this was relatively easy sentence. And then you have to remember to save. The problem with this poem, now that we go to the actual poetic part, there are very many Sapphic dialect, so Aeolic dialect forms, and you need to know it. The system here, the Morpheus tool, is based on Attic Greek, and it kind of gives suggestions for this form. For example, this was the word sun, Helios. It does not give us the correct verb here. And also it does not recognize at all this word, auge, which is the ray. So the sun's rays are here, what Memnon is feeling when he is uttering the sound. And this is basically the same word. You would think that the Morpheus tool would understand it, but since the Aeolic dialect does not have the similar accentuation, the accentuation in Aeolic dialect is recessive. So the editors of the text have given the accent in the Aeolic dialect form, even though they are not in the stone. So the stone does not have the accentuation marks, but they are in our text here. And they do help us with some other words, but they do not help us with these words. I mean, they don't give us the interpretations that we would wish that we have. One side note I need to make here is that it will not give you any suggestions for these words unless you have sort of selected here pre-select version. So if you have that undone, then you don't see all these suggestions that the system makes you. But it's very good to have, because usually they are right, but with this dialectal poem, they are not helping us. So with these kinds of words, we need to create the word from scratch for the system. So first of all, we need to give the lemma for this word, which is auge. So the accentuation is different. We need to tell it's a noun. We need to tell it's a singular, it's a feminine, and it's a dative. Another thing that is not clearly recognizable would be, you see that it's offering me something because I have done the other poems where this word already exists. So it remembers that this was apu, which actually is the preposition apo, but only because I already did that elsewhere. So I would need to give the morphological forms for all of these words. For example, the Theban stone that was mentioned, this is actually a genitive form. So I would need to, here it does give me the option that this is genitive. So I don't need to create this form. So I will not build this tree all the way through. It will take too much time. But I'm just mentioning that annotating these poems is a very different case from annotating sort of Attic Greek, because they are rare dialectal forms here that you need to do a lot of sort of manual labor with. But I have annotated the other sentences already, so we can look at how the syntactic trees look like. And I have sort of, now that I have done it, I have in my head quite a lot of the feeling of how the words have been used, what kind of words are there. So this was the first poem, which was quite as long as the third one, I mean the second one. So here we have the second one. The sentences are not terribly long. They are not terribly complex. There are not very many subordinate clauses, and so on. And the poems number 3 and 4 were even shorter. Then now that I need to try to find the Sappho versions so that we can compare. So here. So this is from the Pedalion project that you will probably hear a bit more from Alek. And there was one student apparently who has annotated all Sappho. So the Sapphic poems are very fragmentary too, but there is still something that you can look at. So just sort of, as I said, I'm not doing any electronic queries at this point. I mean, we could do that later on when we have all the trees, but our corpus is quite small for the Balbilla case. And looking at these trees, just in the general impression, you can already see that, for example, this sentence is quite more complex than any of the ones that were there in Balbillas. This is, of course, a bit simpler. Of course, there is lots of variation and many sort of not so well preserved sentences as well. But basically, these are lot more complicated. Here, for example, you have lots of conditional clauses, which we didn't see at all in Balbilla. I found some sentences that are sort of quite similar in structure. So with Balbilla, there were quite many of these where you have 3 different predicates coordinated, but still in Sappho there are more attributes and so on. The sort of most famous poem sentence probably was it 102? So this is the Phainetae moikenos isos theoisin poem, which is the most famous one. So here you go far beyond what we have in Balbilla. But of course, we can't compare this directly. Also, the sentence division always depends on the editors too. Second, Balbilla poems were inscribed in stone. You have to think about that. But what we could do then, when we have all these text tree-banked, we could take a query tool, electronically query different structures, and with Sappho and Balbilla, what I was thinking that we could also just query is how much of the vocabulary is similar or same, actually, so that we would see what if Balbilla was having Sappho's poems as a travel reading. So there were actually, I found quite many exactly the same words that were appearing, and not just the dialectal forms, but the dialectal forms were taken into account quite well too. And then we could just look at some syntactic structures, like how many attributes do nouns usually get, for example, sort of adjective attributes or genitive attributes. And then, for example, what kind of subordinate structures, different types of structures Sappho uses or some other poets use compared to what Balbilla uses. So these are the things that we could then look at. So I'm leaving this then to Alek to show us a nice query tool.
Thank you, Marja. Okay, let me go to the slides. Okay, great. So basically, what Marja just showed that this treebanking tool, this treebanking method is very powerful. If we, for example, want to compare two different texts, then we can just manually annotate them and find a lot of interesting things about them. But what if we want to study a lot more Greek text, if you want to basically study the whole Greek corpus? Because as a linguist, for example, I'm a linguist, and I might be interested in Greek in general rather than the Greek of two specific authors, or, for example, a historian or a literary scholar might also be interested in patterns in a broader collection of text. So how do we do so? Because as I think Marja has clearly showed, treebanking is fun, but also quite intensive. So if we wanted to treebank the whole Greek corpus, this would amount to millions and millions of words, which simply isn't feasible. So that's why I will talk a little about this CLAUX project, which stands for the Greek Language Automated. And yeah, the automated part is, of course, a big, it's of course an important thing here. So basically, what I did was I used automated methods to basically do all this treebanking automatically. So I did this for basically almost everything, every literary production we have of ancient Greek up until a certain time period, to make it manageable. So up until the 4th century AD, but I didn't really select one specific subcorpus within this period. So basically, CLAUX contains everything almost in this period, all literary production at least, so ranging from Homer, Bible, mathematical text, narrative text, historians, and so on and so on. So what does CLAUX contain? Basically everything Marja has just shown for manual treebank. So it contains lemmas, morphology, syntax, syntactic trees, and we are also currently now experimenting a little with meaning annotation. So on the slides you can see the query interface website that we will go to in a minute. But if you want to work with basically the raw data, the raw XMLs that CLAUX is based on, you can also find them online on the second link here. By the way, why they all, as you might know, CLAUX is simply Greek for all. So that's So that's why the little logo there. As I said, and I will keep this presentation rather brief, but as I said, it's automatically annotated. How does this work? Basically, what I first did was collected all the manually annotated tree banks that are available. So these big projects that Marja talked about, the ancient Greek dependency tree banks, the Pro-IL, so this Bible annotation, there are lots more out there. We also did a little of our own in Leuven, and basically what I then did was to use AI systems, basically, or machine learning as a more technical term, to basically learn, so to look for statistical patterns that we can find in this data. In which cases can we expect subjects, for example? In which cases can we expect that something is the nominative case, for example? And then so this AI machine learning systems then try to replicate the patterns that it has learned from this manually annotated tree banks to new annotated tree banks. So basically a small part of clouds is manually annotated, about 5%, which is just those minimal tree bank projects. But all the other 95% is done by this machine learning. And so everything is done there automatically. So of course this is done automatically, which also means that it has some error margins. So for the lemmas, there are no very big problems. For morphology, it already drops a little, and as you can see, for syntax, that's something that we want to work, that we still want to work on. So it's decent enough that it's usable, but there will definitely be some mistakes, which will probably also pop up if you decide to do the exercise related to this part. Okay, but so now I will just present the Glauks query website. So I don't know if you can see this or not. Maybe I should. Okay, great, thank you. So basically, if you go to Glauks, well, so the website is simply glauks.be, and if you go there, you get on the start page of the Glauks website. So if you want to use Glauks a lot, I would suggest to check this website, because all updates that we want to carry out with Glauks will also be posted here. So so there are also some links again to the raw data, and if you want some more background information about this project, you can also find it here. But we will now go to the online query interface. So then we get to a page like this, where you have some short instructions, and I will simply click on start searching. So then we get to this kind of page. So basically what you do here is you simply, and what you basically do here is you simply try to search for a pattern as you would annotate it in a syntactic tree, as Marja has just showed. But I will just simply start with a very easy example without that doesn't involve any syntax at all. So, for example, we can simply search for simply words in the full Glauks corpus. So, for example, you might be interested in owls in antiquity. So then we can simply search in Glauks for the lemma Glauks. So we have here a word selected, and we say, okay, we search for a word, and we can type in Greek here, and this word should actually be the lemma Glauks, and yeah, then we get two options. I will select this one. Okay, so we search for dilemma, so all occurrence of glaucs in all cases in the full Greek corpus. So then we can click already on search, and then we get this list of results. So what do we get here? We get well, list of authors, list of titles of works, but then the words that we search for, so glaucs in all cases in this specific sentence, and then we finally have a button that is mostly red, but it can also be green. What does this mean? Basically, what I talked about earlier on. So some parts of glaucs are automatically annotated, some parts are manually annotated. So if you hover over this one, you see, okay, this is just an automatically annotated sentence, but here we actually have a sentence that is actually taken from a tree bank. So this is manually annotated, so we're pretty sure here that yeah, the annotation is correct here. So this is taken from this kind of project at the bottom. So well, coincidentally Leuven tree banks, but there are also of course other projects included here, and is annotated by this person, Vanessa Gorman here. Okay, so what can we do else? Well, so now we have a list of results. We see that basically we have 115, just 115 cases of dilemma glaucs in the full Greek corpus. Then we can also, for example, export these results and do some data analysis on them if you want. So that's this button here. Okay, so that was a very simple query. Now I will show something more complex involving syntax. So for example, let us start from just an easy example. Let's say, okay, we want to look for infinitives, and as you probably know, ancient Greek is quite complex morphologically. So we have different kinds of infinitives. We have present infinitives, we have aorist infinitives, we have future infinitives, we have perfect infinitives. Let's try to search for perfect infinitives, for example, and we want perfect infinitives that depends on a specific verb, and let's say that this verb that we are interested in is the verb lego. So we're interested in all cases of lego with a perfect infinitive. How do we do it? So, well, we start the same way as we just did. So we use the lemma field to say, okay, we have a lemma lego. What do we want to have dependent on it? So we click basically then on this word, and we say add the dependent. So a word depending on its meaning in the syntactic tree, it's one branch below it. So we select add dependent, and we say, okay, this dependent, what should it be? It should be mood infinitive, and the tense should be perfect. So we want perfect infinitives, and maybe we also want to specify this infinitive is an object of this verb. So we say, okay, we click on this arrow, then we have some selection for syntactic relations, and we say the syntactic relation should be object for object. Okay, so we click search. And again, we have, for instance, cases such as legan, gogenenai, legan, pepoiastai, legon, gogenenai, so all kinds of cases of legan with perfect infinitives. Well, I won't go into the results, but if you just briefly look at them, you can also see that these are, if you know these authors, a lot of them are very late authors, which also is interesting for linguistic reasons. So we know from linguistics that this perfect infinitive becomes more popular later in time, and that's also what we see in these results. So that's very nice. Well, there is also a button that says distinguish structure. Here it's not very interesting, but it's will be more interesting if you have a more complex query. So then simply you give colors to different elements. So the first word that we search for now gets a brown color. The second word that we search for has this kind of black color here. Okay, I think, but maybe I should, I think I have some time to show a little more complex query, I guess. Well, if I'm running a little behind, just interrupt me. But okay, let's search now.
Keep going.
Okay, great. So let's search for something more complex. So, for example, as you know, in ancient Greek, you can have very complex, what we call noun phrases. So, for example, we can have things like when involving genitives. So, for example, we can say something in Greek like ho, or let's say to. I'm just typing it here because I don't have a field to type here. But so we can have something like to anthropu onoma. So something like the name of the person. That's something you can say in Greek, where you have first the article and then at the very end the noun, and then you have it interrupted by this genitive. So let's try to see if we can find cases of this complex construction in the corpus as well. So I did I did something I shouldn't do. Well, maybe I should first actually show this one as well. So, well, here we have our previous query, and then you also have an option to refine. Like, for example, if we wanted to search for aorist infinitives, we can simply change our query. But that's not what we're going to do now. So I will just click on search again and start again from the beginning. So basically, then we have to have like the syntactic tree in mind. So basically, what we will have at the top of our syntactic tree is just a noun, like any noun. So we say noun. Okay, we say, okay, on this noun, we want to have an article dependent on it. So for example, in our to anthropo onoma case, this article will be this article here, so this top part. So we say, okay, there is an article dependent on it. So we say article, then on this word we say, okay, on this word there will be a genitive dependent on it. So this is this kind of genitive here. It will depend in the syntactic structure on onoma. So we say, okay, this genitive, so this word should be a noun, another noun. In we go to case, the genitive case, and then we say, okay, on this noun in the genitive case. So again, we have this case, we have an article in the another article on the genitive, which will be dependent on this anthropo here, for example. So we say, okay, in this case, there is an article in the genitive. Okay, so that's this. So that's a syntactic structure, and then we have to specify the word order. And now I have to pay some attention that I'm doing it in the right way. So basically, what we first have is this article So first we have this word two, then we have the genitive article, so that's the word for here. Then we have the genitive noun, so that's word three here. And then we have the, basically the noun, so that's the word one here. So basically everything we put here, so everything that was here, the word order will be ignored. Everything that we put here, the word order will be respected from top to bottom. So word two is first, word one is last. So then we can click search again. This is a little complex query, so sometimes it makes some time, but now it was very fast actually. So then we get this kind of results. So for example, ton turine diakonon totes anekes stenos tontas boas pait. So again, this kind of specific construction. Yeah, we don't have the total results yet because our query was a little complex, so that will take some time, but you can already see that we get quite a lot of cases of such a kind of construction in the full Greek corpus. So, well, basically, that's the search interface. So what do we want to do next with Clouds? Well, first of all, for the interface, we want to add some more filters that might be very interesting for for linguists, but all kinds of researchers or students, for example. So well, we have some filters here, but they actually don't do anything, simply because we only have Greek text here and literate text here. In the summer, I will also add some papyrus text to Glauks. And there is also a filter here. Let's say we don't trust these automated annotations very much, then we can also just use this redacted, which simply are all the manually annotated sentences. So for example, if we would choose this option and if everything works correctly, we will only get green dots here. So simply manually annotated results, but in the future we will also add some more filters to it. For example, let's think about the Balbilla case. So Sappho and Balbilla, they wrote in the Aeolic dialects, but there are well, not many, but there are some more writers who wrote there, so it might be interesting to look at the language of all Aeolic writers, for example, or it might be interesting to look at specific time periods to look at language change. So all this information is already present in Cloud. So if you would go to this website where all the data, where all the XMLs where all XMLs are present, you can see that well, all this information is already there. So people who are more technically minded can can already look for them, but that's also something we want to add to the interface. We're also experimenting with some more semantic things. So for example, if you want to look for people or animals in Greek, we hope that this will actually be possible very soon. So these are all kinds of things you can do with Clouds, which is basically everything I wanted to say about Clouds. So I guess, well, we can get back to Gabi now already. Unless there are maybe some questions already.
Oh, fantastic! That's really cool. I actually looking forward to using this now. I haven't seen in detail how that works, so that's going to be very exciting. Cool. Yeah, I just wanted. I mean, I didn't want to say very much more at the end of this. I was thinking a little bit. I wanted to think a little bit about how some of the various tools that we've seen so far, the tree banking, the looking at the trees, just getting a visual sense of the complexity and shape of the trees that Marja showed us, the sorts of queries that Alek has showed us, what sorts of things what sort of insights that might give us into our reception sort of study, just as a sort of thought experiment, really. I mean, we haven't done that part of the study yet, but the sorts of things we might get are whether, for example, whether the slightly different morphology and grammar used in this dialect is reflected in the trees, and if so, do the Balbilla poems reflect it in the same way that Sappho does? I mean, we've got a very small amount of data, but you know, did Balbilla just go in and say, okay, here are a couple of verb endings we should change to make it look a bit more like Sappho, or did she have a more sort of sophisticated and intimate sense of that dialect? So things like that are the sorts of things that you could do with traditional linguistic analysis, but having tree banked it, you've suddenly looked at and visualized those sorts of features at a great amount of depth. So that's one sort of. I don't know if anyone else wanted to jump in with other suggestions there. But
well, at least for me, it seems like it was very nice to see Glauc's in action, and the word order is very good to have there. I mean, that is something that is not so easily sort of seen just when you sort of read or annotate things. You don't get the feeling of that so easily. But I mean, we know that during several hundreds of years between Sapphic poems and when Balbilla was writing, the word order there has been changes. So how well? But then the question, of course, here is also that it's a poetic language, and word order in that is not actually the same question as in prose it would be. So that's adds another filter there, but still it would be interesting to compare those things, like how the different genitive attributes, for example, are there, or yeah.
I think even in verse, the word order in Greek poetry of this period had been influenced by Latin word order, right? I mean, you start seeing these really complex word order in Greek poetry that wasn't so common in earlier centuries, that you see in Latin, where you say, let's have all the adjectives at the beginning of the sentence and all the nouns at the end of the sentence, and that sort of real sort of messes with your head sort of way of doing it, which you started to see in Greek in imitation of Latin sometimes. Or I don't know if it's imitation or if it's a native Latin speaker writing in Greek, but those sorts of things could also be worth looking at whether we've got any weird features coming from that. Yeah.
One interesting thing is it doesn't concern tree banking as such, but I don't know, Alek, are there any sort of metrical annotations in your poetic text? How much poetic text do you actually have there?
Well, just how many I have is basically, well, almost like the parts of Greek literature, at least or let's put it like this: most poetic texts will be included in Glauc's, at least until this time period. But metrical annotation is not there, unfortunately. It would be very interesting, but then, well, there should be either some automated method that can do it very accurately, which might actually be feasible for Greek. I don't know if there's any work done in this regard, or well, some people who want to do it manually, but for the full poetic corpus, it will also be a lot of work. So, but I guess it will be feasible to do it automatically. Like at least like in Greek, vowel length is much more clear than it would be in Latin, for example. So it already makes it easier.
Yeah. Well, anyway, in the Balbil case, we already know that for some reason Balbilla didn't follow Sapphic meter at all. So the Balbilla's poems are in elegy. What's it in English? Sorry.
Elegiac.
Elegiac
hexameter. Yeah.
And not the Sapphic meters. So for some reason she didn't feel comfortable in that area. Yeah.
I mean, for some reason, I completely sympathise. Yeah. But yeah, that would be interesting to see large amounts of metrically annotated Greek in this sort of interface as well. Yeah. Very sweet. Of course, meter changes mean slightly different things in different periods. Probably Balbilla understood meter in a not entirely different way from the the classical elegiac texts that she's thinking of, but certainly only a few hundred years later, by early Byzantine texts, meter means something slightly different. It becomes a stress meter rather than a quantitative meter, and so forth. So there'd be a little bit of care about whether we're comparing like with like, but
yeah, and since the vowel length has already basically gone, but she has education for understanding the vowel length as well as the sort of dialectal forms, which are no longer used. So.
Yeah, which pretty much everybody, I think, still in the imperial period did. You don't see a lot of Greek poetry being written by people who have forgotten what vowel length is. But as I say, 500 years later, you do. You get completely different things. Yeah. So one just final thing I wanted to briefly mention, and I'll just pop into my screen again there. So this is the session page for this session, which there's a link to in the text beneath the video here on YouTube. So we've included in this some of the resources that we've talked about here today so far, but also what I wanted to mention is that we've got a suggested exercise, and depending on if you're doing this, following the session as part of a class, then the word option may or may not be true for you. Your tutor will tell you which of these things are optional, which of these things they strongly recommend you to do. But so we've offered two suggested exercises that might be useful to do in this case. One of them involves effectively going to another Sunoikisis session from 4 years ago that introduces morphosyntactic annotation in much more technical detail than we have done, and gives you an exercise using the Arethusa tool on the Perseids platform, and shows you sort of step by step how you go about annotating, and also gives you the guidelines in a sort of potted description. If you feel you don't need the walkthrough of the guidelines, there are also the guidelines that are linked here, the Greek or Latin guidelines. And so there are some fairly simple texts. There's some Aesop in Greek, some Vierros in Latin, which have some fairly straightforward sentences that you can have a go at treebanking. If you're not a classicist with fluent Greek or Latin, and you don't feel comfortable doing those tree banks, but you want to try out tree banking, you can also in Arethusa use the universal dependencies syntax to annotate some English text, and there's some guidelines for that, again linked here in this page, and you can do some exercise from that, and you'll have to pick your own English text for that. You can pick any sentences starting from simple to more complex to have a go at that. I think it's quite useful to get a sense of what sorts of trees you're likely to be looking at. Even if what you decide to do is option 2, which I'll come to in a second, having some sense of what the tree would look like is going to be essential for doing the sorts of queries that Alek has just been showing you. How you would expect the tree to look is what the query will look like. So if you want to do that second exercise, Alek has proposed an exercise here using the Glauc's tool, and it starts with a very simple sort of grammatical truism, which is that in Greek, a neuter plural subject takes a singular verb, unlike any other plural subject would take a plural verb, and just ask you to say, well, look for some examples of that. And is it always true? Try and find some neuter plural subjects that take a plural verb. And is there a difference in there? Why is that the case? But also, he suggests looking at some of these results. Remember that you probably see about 90% of the results are not manually checked. The ones with the red dots, look at some of those and see, are they really instances of what they've been tagged as, or can you find any mistakes in there? Is there anything that's not really a case of a neuter plural subject with a plural verb? To give you a sense both of the functionality of the tool and of the reliability of the corpus, which I think are both important things you want to check when you're doing this sort of research. Does anybody want to say any more about either of those two exercises?
Well, I think what needs to be emphasized for both of them is that in order to be able to do anything, even query, you need to sort of know what the formalism is like. So you have to know what the dependency syntax means in a way that what it goes under what. So in that way, you need to first familiarize yourself with that. But it's fun.
Yes, and depending on you know in yourself how your brain learns things and how you like to spend your time, you could either spend the sort of a little under 1 hour watching the relevant part of that video and see someone describing that formalism and that syntax in great detail, and with lots of examples, or you could have a look at the Celano's guidelines for the annotation of Greek or Bamman's guidelines for the annotation of Latin, and instead read through in your sort of your own speed those guidelines and work from that. So some people work better looking at something on a page. Some people work better if something's been explained to them in a sort of more audiovisual way. But those are two possibilities for you to get a start at that. And as Marja said, it's going to be absolutely essential to understand how these trees are formed, whether you want to create some yourself or whether you want to query the existing ones. And I'm sure if you start playing with Glauc's and you very quickly master this query that we've had suggested on there, you probably won't want to stop. You'll probably say, I'm going to invent my own queries. Let's look at some other examples. See what else we can find. And I think it would be really nice. I really look forward to when you've got some of these more advanced search features that you were talking about, Alek, to start doing that query and saying, well, actually, how true is this truism about neuter plurals in the classical period, and how true is it in the Roman period, and how true is it in the later period? Is there a variation between those three? I don't know if we should expect there to be or not, but that'd be a question of what to ask.
I don't know either myself yet. So.
Can I ask a question? So Alek, when you were presenting the results for the queries you made, can you also go and see the trees, or do you also only get the sort of text based result?
I don't know the answer really, because it's something we wanted to implement at some time, but I don't know if we fully implemented it yet. Okay, no, I just looked at it and it's still something under construction, but hopefully in the future.
Okay, good.
I was interested as well when you showed your final example where you showed word order for your, Totu Anthropu Onoma example. A lot of the results that came up, it wasn't just those 4 words, there were other words in there as well. Is it possible to say, or might it be possible to construct a query which says, I want things not just in this order, but with nothing intervening?
Yes, that's a good question. That's something I didn't show, but well, maybe I can just quickly show the page again. Well, I'm in a different tab, so I don't know if I'm showing it now to you, but there is a button here that says word distance, and then you can say actually the range of words, so the maximum distance in which they have to occur. So I think that I'm not sure if it should be 1 or 0, if it's all following each other, but let's say.
But you'd have to do a couple of queries and you'd quickly see
No,
what
okay, or it's countersign 4. Okay, it's been some time, but I think I have to say 4, I guess, because it's 4
because it's 4 words.
Yes, and then we all get basically words that are completely following each other. So yes.
Sweet, perfect. Thank you. That's an even better answer than I hoped for.
May I ask a question? I'm sorry. I've never, I'm very interested in tree banking, but I've never done it myself, also because the text with which I work usually are a lot, but very small. So I've always, wanted to try and apply tree banking and or text alignment to a sigillographic data set, right? So something that I didn't quite get, but because I haven't read myself the guidelines and so on and so forth. So according to how you tag your data, pretty much, are queries possible, such as, for example, like using wildcards, more or less? So for example, in position 1 there should be a vocative of this specific word or any specific word relating to that domain, and between there is any word, so like an asterisk wildcard pretty much, and after that it's a verb, for example. I'm just inventing right now, so as to build in a way an invocation. Are such queries would such queries be possible in a way, like using a combination of wildcards and lemmata, if I understood correctly? So I guess in Glaucs, in this case.
So in the Glaucs example, that would be a little that's not implemented at least, but well, if you want to do it, so all the data is basically available. So if you know something about XML querying, those kind of things, it would be possible, but it's simply a case of something we didn't implement in
Okay.
But large parts of that are implemented, right? I think, from what I understand, the searching for a vocative of a word in a particular domain, that's a level of semantics that's probably just not in the data and therefore isn't implemented. But saying I want to find a vocative on which is dependent a word about which I'm not going to say anything, but on which is dependent a word with this particular grammatical feature, that sort of wildcard feature. I mean, that's built in. You just, the less you specify, the wilder the word, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, then I understood something like that. Oh, I got some echoes. Something like that would be possible. Yes.
Perfect. Yeah, because I always think that it would be interesting to do some linguistic annotation and linguistic analysis of some. I mean, once again, these are we're talking about if we're talking about metrical seals, we're talking about let's say one dodecasyllable per side, and I'm saying this very broadly. So I mean, there's not much text, but there's, I mean, that's the quantity that counts in this case. So it will be interesting. So, but I close the parentheses because I could go on and on. And
I think if you wanted to do that, I think you would want to. So you've got your seals presumably marked up in SigiDoc, which is
they
effectively,
will be in that.
let's say we've got 10 or 100 seals marked up in SigiDoc, which is effectively Epidoc, and the features you're interested in are not only the morphology and the syntax and so forth, but also to some degree things like that Marja was talking about: editorial correction, dialect, odd spellings, supplements, expansion of abbreviations, those sorts of things that you want in there. So I think what you want is you want to upload some of your seals to Papygreek and encode them there, because that handles those features. And I think that would be, I mean, I don't want to make promises that Marja then has to keep, but that sounds like the sort of thing that would be entirely possible, and not of zero interest to Papygreek either, right? To have that sort of information in there. So I think that sort of thing. There would be a couple of things that you might want to think about. What decisions you've made in the Epidoc, because my Epidoc markup of the poems of Balbilla didn't work in Papygreek first off, because I'd made a decision about the encoding of editorial corrections that was different from the way it's done in papyri.info, which is what Papygreek is expecting. So we just had to tweak that a little bit. It was a very, very minor thing. It wasn't that it was wrong. It was just that it was a different decision. But so there might be a little bit of back and forth on that. But I think as an experiment, that would be to me, not who doesn't have to do any work in this. That sounds like that'd be a lot of fun to do.
Yeah.
Yes, I can continue with that. It might be useful then to have Papygreek's features and possibilities, and I didn't show our search tool, but it works quite similarly as what Alek was showing. Where is that coming from?
Someone's echoing.
So what was I going to say? Got confused. Anyway, in the search engine, we also have the regular expression possibilities and whatnot. But I wasn't showing it now. But yes, also possibility to search for the sort of editorial corrections for the orthographic part. So yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And
we have a question.
Actually have a question. Yeah, should I show it? Yeah. So I think this is for Alek. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, maybe this is something that we just, if you send me an email about it, it's something that that we can discuss because it's like very specific about the normalization here of the data. But well, it's definitely something that we can discuss. So just I think. Well, I don't think my email address is included, but if you just search for my name, you can easily find it. So. Okay.
Perfect.
Now, cool. The first question is from someone who's reusing your open source tool. I dream of questions like that.
Perfect. If there are no more questions, I think we can call it a day. What do you folks think? Perfect. So yeah, so just a very quick note on next session. And this is our second to last session, which is a pity. And we're going to talk, and it's a quite seamless discussion from what we were talking before, because we're going to talk about Byzantine and medieval sigillography and XML, machine learning, and decision trees. So next week, same day, same time, and yeah. I will see you next week. And thank you, Gabby, Marja, and Alek. It was amazing, very inspiring. And yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye, everyone.